Bish bosh bash. Evening, everybody. Thanks for coming on. Coaching supervision. Don't know what that means, but we'll find out in a minute. One of the things that Chris and I do is actually we do it with we started doing it with each other first. Actually, we used to sometimes talk through clients that we were working with, and more not necessarily looking for input from the other person, but just almost like just talking through what that client was facing, what we were working on. Sometimes we'd kind of give each other permission to chip in on, different ways that we could approach that client. We learned a lot from other people's styles, and I think probably the key with tonight is we've got a few questions that have come in advance, and we also kind of brainstormed other common patterns that we see in clients, and we're far from saying this is the only way to coach. You're going to probably see the different flavors that me and Chris bring to coaching. You might completely disagree with our approach. That's fine as well. So you're going to learn some ways not to coach. We'd love to get your input as well in terms of other thoughts you've got around it. But, hopefully Chris and I sort of downloading how we would approach coaching situation would be useful. We find out with our group, the Secret Business of Coaching group, that a lot of coaches that are in different stages of their journey, different stages of experience, find it quite useful having input from people that have been, I wouldn't say wily old hands, but in my case, the grey bits in my beard probably give that away. So, Chris, do you want to say something deep and meaningful at the start before we kick off?
No.
Nah, just sit there in silence, mate.
Yeah, I think you've covered that, Rich. No, supervision is a really important element, and if I'm honest, didn't fully appreciate the depth of value that's there in supervision until I started working more and more with other coaches, both under apprenticeships, one-to-one, and also within the group, the Secret Business of Coaching group that you mentioned. So just a chance to bring client questions to sessions, and also client creation questions as well. I literally, before this call, had a message from a recent apprentice I've taken on from Washington, and he thanked me because our previous conversation led him to offer a $10,000 contract rather than a $5,000 contract for the same length of contract. So he's made $5,000 extra there from our conversation.
You ever going to give me any of those nuggets, Chris, when we speak every week, or?
No.
Okay. All right, good stuff. Should we just kick off? So I guess what I'll do is I'll read out the questions that we got in advance. There's a few other things, and then maybe we just give our spin on it. And if other people want to jump in, if you feel strongly about something, then please do so. Yeah, is that a good way to work? I think so. That's the way I'm going to work anyway. And I'm in control of the Zoom webinar, so that's fine. A question in, and it was the challenge of working with someone who is held back by concerns they have on the impact of their growth and the change in their relationships. I won't name who it was, but it was like, I can recall a time when a friend was inspired to grow based on conversations we had. She grew, her husband didn't like it one bit and blamed me. So I guess it's about helping with that sensitivity, kind of that awareness of, when you have a coaching conversation with someone or a coaching relationship with someone, that it can impact, obviously, hopefully will impact on them, but also impact on their close relationships and how to handle that. So I've had some thoughts about it. Chris, do you want to go first or second? I'm always polite.
Yeah, I'll dive in. I've had some thoughts as well. So if people see me looking off to my right, I've got a second monitor, so that's why I'm not kind of my eye patterning isn't going nuts. Yeah, yeah, leave him. That was my initial thought. It's a really interesting one, this, because partners are such an important part of the coaching process. When you coach, especially when you enter a deep coaching relationship with a coach, it's a significant relationship, and partners can, if they're not involved in that in some way, it can really cause an issue. So my take on this, my experience is to and when I'm coaching as well, is to involve partners as much as possible. So even this morning I had a session with a client. And my advice at the end, because there's some really deep insights in the session, was I coached her on how she was going to speak about this with her partner. didn't directly relate to their relationship. It wasn't a relationship issue, but what I saw was two things. First of all, the depth of her insights that she had in the session could be deepened even further by her having to articulate them. Secondly, he would then feel more involved in the whole coaching process because she'd shared this thing that's significant with him.
Yeah. Yeah, very similar, really. I think it is that, you know what, it's helping without even realizing it. Sometimes partners or friends and stuff can actually subconsciously or even actually overtly hold you back because, you know what, it's a perceived threat to that relationship. And so I agree with what you're saying there, that kind of like, you know, that hand holding, that, you know, communicate with your friends, your loved ones, those you want to maintain a relationship with, you know, where you're going and why it's important for you to go that way, and that there is no obvious threat to that relationship. In fact, actually, it probably will strengthen it. That being said, I have seen a number of occasions, particularly in the Tony Robbins environment. You know, I don't know if Christine's on as well, who we serve together in that environment. You know, we're going to a thing called Date with Destiny in December, and some people nickname it Date with Divorce. Because sometimes you do get insights and you know, powerful shifts in people, and that can actually ultimately mean that actually an ending of a relationship is appropriate. And you know, no one's ever. I was talking to a client of mine today, and he said, "Oh, well, good news is I've got way more time to work on my business now." And I was like, "Why is that?" And he went, "I could just split up with my girlfriend." And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter whose decision that was; that has an impact, right? But you know, one pattern I do see, if I'm going to kind of call out the male energy a little bit there, is some husbands, that male energy can be expressed as control, and so their partner making shifts and progress, you know, that can threaten that control, which obviously is not particularly healthy in a relationship. And so, you know what, sometimes that will happen. So your joke about leave him, you know what, in some cases that might end up being the appropriate thing. Just that we'll explore other avenues first. And as a coach, you know what, one of the great things as a coach is you're not there to be their friend. So you don't have this challenge going on, which is I value my friendship with you over me saying things that might be difficult or awkward. And that's probably why one of the reasons why people pay you to be a coach is that you can help them to get what they need rather than trying to soothe them and give them what they want and maintain a friendship. I have ended one coaching relationship by something like this happening, and it was just like I just said what I thought I need to said, and it just didn't. They effectively this couple valued their relationship higher than this person progressing through coaching, and so that then the blame got focused on me, and that's fair enough, and it might well have been something to do with me, but in that case, they've made a choice that their relationship was more important than this particular client's progress. So it happens.
There's just one final thing to add to that, and there's often in the proposal phase, you make a proposal to a potential client, they will naturally and quite rightly want to discuss it with their partner. That's fine. You should actually encourage that to actually to avoid the very thing we've just talked about further down the line. But just for the coaches here, one thing to note with that is I ask the client, okay, how are you going to speak with your partner about this session? Because they haven't been present at this session. So often you get that. A fantastic session, the client is really keen to work with you, but they want to speak with their partner, but the partner has been at the session, so all he sees is maybe a significant fee for an amount of time, amount of sessions. And that person needs to be coached on how to effectively enroll their partner in their own vision. So that's just another thing on partners I thought I mentioned.
Yeah, it's important that, you know, it's like, you know, who else might be a decision maker in this process, and to, you know, whenever I'm making a proposal, we're probably going to talk more about the business side next week, but whenever I make a proposal, I'm always making sure they write down the key elements of it. So you might want to share this with someone else. as part of the decision-making process, or to kind of justify why you said yes or no to this proposal. Peter, you typed in, I see this a fair bit, junior NLP training. Peter says the lady realised she wanted to end her marriage, didn't have the strength to do it, and she became a mess. Yeah, I see that a lot. You know what? Sometimes you have that insight, and it's like, do you know what? They realise that, their own progress and the relationship is incompatible. And I think as a great coach, if you can help them to work through that and explore the possibilities of, could you have both? Could the relationship transform along with you? I think you kind of owe it to people to explore all avenues, but also consider what things might look like outside the relationship as well. I probably think more than anything in modern society, I was brought up with marriages last forever. I never thought I'd go through a divorce, but hey ho, my bank account in 2001 showed me otherwise. So, yeah, Sam, I like what you put in there. For me, I like to make it clear that change will occur from the outset, and I need to be clear with that. Part of my coaching agreement. I think that's really smart. I like that. Set up that framework. And you're right, Peter. That particular lady realised that she actually had a choice that she wasn't aware of before. Very cool. Excellent. Right. Shall we move on to the next one, unless there's any more thoughts on that? Great input, guys, by the way. Thank you for that. The next question, do you want to read it out, or shall I do it, Chris?
Yeah, I'll read it out. So I'm not sure how to frame this question, but something I have sometimes not known how to best work with is how to support the client in shifting into ownership with their language, etc., or when their language, etc., suggests that they are in a state of being a victim to a situation. So good question. So shifting the client into ownership when maybe their language suggests that they're in the victim space. Do you want to shoot first?
Yeah. So for me, I will often, so one thing I'm quite sensitive to language. It's also one of the reasons why I think, when people say, is it better to coach face to face or on a phone or Skype webcam or Zoom like this? Everything has a value, and some of the values of actually doing like phone coaching or Skype coaching just on audio, and some clients prefer that, is you pick up language. So going back to my NLP training background, I sort of studied with Bandler, became an NLP trainer with Bandler. And so you've got the classic patterns of like deletion, distortion, generalization, nominalization as well. For those who don't know about, deletion is pretty obvious. Missing stuff out, distortion, distorting stuff, generalization, everything, everyone. Nominalization is, the nominalization test is when they make something a noun, but you can't actually put the thing in a wheelbarrow. So, I am the victim. You can't put a victim in the wheelbarrow, so there's an interesting use of language. What I tend to do when I hear, so I guess over the years I've been trained around that, and I tend to be quite sensitized to hearing language which intrigues or alerts me, and often I will just reflect that language pattern back. So I had a lady today who I was coaching, and she says we were talking about the fact that she was kind of she actually used the word doormat and being a bit of a doormat at work. She said, I need to change that. And I just said to her, I'm intrigued by the word need, because sometimes that can be incredibly empowering, and sometimes it can be like I want it, but I'm not sure I can get it. I'm just wondering what's showing up for you. So often I'll just reflect the language back, and I'll say, is that empowering for you or disempowering? How has that helped you in the past? Or I might even literally just reflect a word back. So it might be, everyone that I have a relationship always lets me down, and I might just literally just reflect back. I'd say everyone. So that would be a generalization. So I'm just querying the language. I don't kind of jump on it too strongly. I just reflect back what I've heard. And I said, and often I'll say, I heard this. I heard you say that. I'm just wondering what shows up for you when you say that. And sometimes they will just repeat back exactly what they said, and there is zero awareness that there's any impact. And then they'll go, so what do you mean by that? Why have you asked me that? And I'll go, and I might then tell a story. I might say, look, I noticed when I use that language pattern, or I knew someone that used that, and what it meant for them was that, and that might apply to you or not. So I'm quite a gentle sort of, for want of a better phrase, sounds a bit dodgy, sort of gentle probing. Peter likes that one.
That's the week after next webinar.
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's that. We're going back to deep coaching again, aren't we? Oh dear, that's very inappropriate. Yeah. So I will. I will just ask. You know what? How does that make you feel using that language? How does that make you feel? You know, what's the impact of you using that language on a regular basis? You know, would your best friend use that language? Or if someone that you loved used that language towards you, how would you feel? And that, for me, is that victim thing. Or, you know, or if your best friend was using that language, how would you feel about it? Sometimes it's useful for them to kind of disassociate or see it from another perspective, an outside perspective. But I guess it's kind of like I'm quite a big believer in kind of gently guiding or bringing awareness, shining a spotlight on language. Anyway, I'll shut up now so Chris can have a say.
I could just say what Rich said.
That's one of our key phrases.
Yeah, just to add a little bit. So just repeating, people are very often very unaware of the language they're using, and they're unaware of the power of self-hypnosis with that language as well. So just simply breaking the pattern by stopping the client and repeating that phrase back to them as you've suggested. That's very powerful coaching, actually, very simple technique. So something like, I did this and then she said this and she made me feel that way. She made you feel that way? And that's often enough to pattern break and to shine the mirror up so that the client then sees, okay. And that's a classic example and a classic indication of the victim space, is when the person believes that the world is making them feel a certain way. It's nice, actually. So in terms of how to deal with that, you can do it like that. I often also talk about the 3 principles work when I talk about victim and owner as well. So for those of you who are not aware, 3 principles work started with a guy called Sid Banks. And the 3 principles are mind, thought, and consciousness. So without going into too much detail on this call, because we know there's a few questions we'd like to get through, the key thing there is that we're in charge of the thought film. So if you think of mind as the bulb in a projector, think of the thought as the film, the reel of film in the projector, and consciousness as being the screen that we're projecting onto. The key message there is that the way we feel is led by the thoughts we predominantly have. And the good news, the empowering news, is that we're in control of that thought film. Maybe not the one that's initially played, because that can be difficult to get back to that seed point. But the one we continually play, we're definitely in control of that. And that's empowering. So just simply sharing that model with people, and the fact that nobody can make us feel a certain way. It's our thoughts about that thing that are then leading us to feel a certain way. I found that useful to help somebody out of the victim space into ownership.
And certain phrase. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Are we allowed to ask questions, or we wait to the end?
What do you reckon, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Is that Annalise?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Annalise.
Go on, Annalise.
Okay, so I subscribe to what you're saying to a certain extent. This connection between feelings and thoughts is an interesting one. You seem to suggest that the thoughts precede the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
However, a couple of questions. Number one, sometimes you have a feeling in your gut, just a sensation. It's a really strange sensation, and you can't connect it to a thought. It's just there.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you have a death in your family. You know, you can't think, oh, that's nothing, it will pass.
Yeah.
It's finished.
Okay, that's the question. Yeah. So, I'll give you my input on those two things, Annalise, and Chris might have a different take on it for sure. So, I agree that sometimes you have sometimes you might perceive that there is a feeling that comes before the thought, and the feeling might lead to a thought, or the thought might lead to a feeling. I do agree with this. If you kind of take it from the Tony Robbins kind of triad type thing, he talks about physiology, focus, and language. What you focus on and the language that you use could actually generate a completely different feeling. And also the feeling at some point could generate a different focus or thought. So the two are kind of interlinked. One doesn't necessarily precede the other, in my opinion. And sometimes there might not be a clear output. So there might be just a thought without a clear feeling, or there might be a feeling without a clear thought. I do agree with you on the. So there are some things that happen, which are often people will come to me and say, I'm grieving the loss or death of a loved one, or breakdown in a relationship. And in that case, I personally don't believe that NLP or coaching or anything like that should be used to try and take that away. I think it's like embrace the natural process that comes from grief. But I do think that coaching can support the process. I would never use it to interrupt a kind of natural flow of something like that. But I might check in on, if someone's going through that grieving process, they might get kind of stuck in a loop where their language is actually keeping them at a level of grief that maybe is actually, they kind of got stuck in one of the phases of grief. So that's where coaching could be useful, but I'm never looking to kind of fix, alleviate, or artificially soothe that sort of process. I don't think that's a correct, in my opinion, a correct use of coaching.
Yep.
Christoph?
Certainly on the second part, I agree with what you're saying there. In regards to thought and feelings, it's a bit of a chicken and egg question for many people, and it's limited value in going there. The key thing, certainly 3 Principles talks very much about thought preceding feeling. But in terms of the key point here was the question about victim and owner. And it is the thought film. The useful thing here is to question whether that thought film is serving you. That's the key thing. Yeah. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, Deb, you put your hand up. Oh, we got to mute you, love. Hold on 1 second. Got to hear your words of wisdom. Go, Deb.
Oh, sorry. I said it's quicker than typing. What I was going to say was, I think that there's a difference between that kind of gut innate sense of fear, say, when you are, when your whole being senses that you're in danger, for instance.
Yes.
And that feeling is, it's so quick that you don't actually, there's not a thought there. That feeling is there well before then. And I think that's quite different to that kind of impending sense of doom based on the chatter that's in your brain that's negative. I think that's quite a different thing. Yeah,
I agree. So if you, so one of my favorite books is Chimp Paradox by Steve Peters.
Yeah.
And he does talk about these kind of different parts of the brain, the conscious brain, the chimp brain or limbic brain, which basically generates that fight, flight, or freeze response, which is 4 or 5 times faster than the conscious, and then the library or computer part of the brain, which again is another 4 times faster, parietal lobe type stuff. And so that you're right, there are sometimes it's just an instinctive or response. I agree with that.
That's just different to the chat, to the negative chat, isn't it? And
Cheers, Deb.
Pleasure.
I'm just going to read out a couple of comments as well, just so we capture it all in the video. So, Peter, you were talking about a lady that used a language which I'll soon be losing my child to university, and you fed that back to her and you said, gosh, did I really say that? And her subconscious was telling how she viewed her child going to uni as a loss, and feeding back to her was really powerful, and it is. And it's like, one of my youngest has just gone to university, and it's like, it was really weird because it was a sense of loss. Then I went down there and saw her in that environment and saw how happy she was. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. Now I can visit that into I can give a positive frame on that. So and Sam, your point, resonate with Chris, says it works really well to encourage a client to question their own thought, find an example as to why it is and isn't true. They can experience empowerment through a choice. And Peter, you're right. Michael Neal describes a feeling as a shadow to a thought. I quite like that. And, you know, one can precede the other. I guess final thoughts I had on this would be, you know, often words come around like kind of stuck or overwhelm, and you know, we talked about this in our group as well, haven't we? People use, you know, it's quite easy to use again these sort of nominalizations. You know, I'm stuck, or I feel stuck, or I'm in a stuck place, and you know, you can question that. Say, well, how do you do stuck? What do you have to focus on to be stuck? Or could you move one foot? Could you pivot? Just kind of breaking down, you know, the kind of the label that might hold you in a place. You know, if someone, I had a client today said she was in overwhelm, and I said, right, okay, so take the stuff that's in overwhelm that's up here, because normally overwhelm you can't quite picture it. Bring it down, put it in front of you on the table. Okay, what have you got? What forms that overwhelm? What are you allowing to form the overwhelm? It actually turned out she was being asked to do a job that was impossible to do. So it was like no crap, she was in overwhelm. So we just broke it down and go, okay, what are you capable of doing? And then the rest has to go back into the business, and someone else has to handle it. So yeah, interesting to see. There are a lot of common words that show up around the victim mentality, and it's, yeah, we all can go into it. It's just a question of recognizing you're running that pattern, and then you then have a choice. Do I want to stay in victim, or do I want to look to take ownership? And you might need help to take ownership as well. Chris, any more on that? I know we could talk all day on this. I'm just aware of time things. So
yeah, let's move on, because there's another question that Sam, who's on the call here, Sam posted about language. So should we do that one?
Yeah, let's do that one. Yeah, do you want to read that out?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to know more about the use of language during coaching. Oh, Sam, do you want to go for it? Do you want to unmute and ask? Yeah, go on then. Can you do that, Rich?
Yeah, I'll do that now. Bang. Oh, hello. Yeah. Ooh. There we go, Sam. You're on.
Welcome, Sam.
I think we unmuted and muted at the same time.
Yeah, I think we did.
So I've got a stinking cold and I've got a hat on because I've just had a shower, so forgive my appearance. Yeah, it was just really, you touched on it last time, Chris, talking about the language that you use with clients and the language that they use to pick out kind of key points. And I kind of want to know a bit more about that, because it's probably, I've noticed the more I'm coaching, the more that's kind of a weak spot for me. So I'd just like to know a bit more about the use of language to kind of draw information out of people.
Ooh, right, great question. Probably a webinar series on this one question.
You'll have to do number 4 and add it on the end.
Yeah, language is just so important. It's the words we use, but also our body language as well. You know, so in terms of language models, there's the NLP models of meta model and Milton model. So Milton model being, for Milton Erickson, being the kind of very general language. I use a lot of Milton model language when I lead meditations, because you don't want to cut across somebody's experience. Excuse me a sec. You don't want to cut across somebody's experience. So you might use things like, so what shows up for you here? You know, does this feel difficult? Does this feel easy for you? So you're giving people the choice of both ends of the spectrum. So that's quite inviting language. And then meta model, you would have heard me use that last week when I was coaching Deb, specifically on the element of the conversation when we got to her Facebook post around her weight loss. Well, actually, not about the weight course. So I was diving into the specifics of when and what's the fee and how many numbers and so on. So that's meta model language. So what specifically, how specifically. So the word specifically is the clue there. You're diving in. So that's one comment on language. In terms of drawing, because the specific question you had was about creating insightful questions and encouraging deep thinking and thought. Yeah. You can start, a nice way to start conversations off is, and you know, Rich Litfin uses this a lot, what would make this conversation today a memorable conversation for you? What would we talk about? So the words you use there, but also the curiosity, what would we talk about? That and fall into silence. So that often promotes a deeper level of thinking. You can say things like, what's really going on here for you?
Yeah.
Just adding the word really in. That's another one. It kind of takes the kind of ego out of it. And it's like, okay, fair game. I was just going to give you this answer, but now you've given me the space to give you the real answer. So it just gives the permission to the client to drop a little deeper there. What's really going on for you? Another little question, and I think I picked this up from I think Joe Hodson, who's in the TSBOC group. You can say something like, is that true? That's a nice question. And an even better question is, what feels more true? So there's lots of questions that promote this deeper level of thinking. But I would also just to finish my answer, re-emphasize the importance of body language. So asking a question, then literally moving your body back. And I will often do that even on calls, intentionally ask a question, and when somebody's speaking, I'll just sit back, just give space. So you can do that on Skype, you can do that in person. And then also slowing down. So I had 3 client sessions today, and the first 2 I led a meditation at the beginning of each one, short 15-minute meditation, and that just slowed the whole thing down. And then the session came from a different space. So hopefully that helps.
Does. Cheers, man.
I don't do deep coaching, so I haven't got anything to add. Sometimes I'll really bring it, depending on what the energy the other person's space are in. I'll say, if we were going to make this a conversation that neither of us would forget for the rest of our lives, what would we need to talk about? And then I'll shut up. Or and sometimes someone will say, you ask them a question, they go, I don't know. And I'll always come back with my kind of stock response to that is, if you did know, what would it be? And then again, shut up.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. Do you mind if I interrupt?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
I often ask that. I also, often ask, if you knew, what would you do? And I often find a wall. I don't know. That's why I told you I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you knew, well, I don't know. So why do you ask me whether I know?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And sometimes, Annalisa, sometimes I will be deliberately annoying, and I say, but if you did know, what would it be? And I'll just keep going.
No, I do the same. And but then I have, Rich, I have to be careful not to kind of bother them. You know what I mean? I know I'm not there to please, but it comes a point where I become one of those kind of really awful person, and I don't want to be that. Sometimes I find this question irritates.
Yeah, and sometimes I will deliberately keep going. I've got Chris the point where probably if I'd been next to him, he would have thumped me. But that was from knowing a client very, very well. So sometimes it is appropriate, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes I might even ask, "Do you know someone that knows?"
Right.
Or which part of your brain knows the answer to that?
I would say, I usually ask a bit of a sort of like a kind of a perception question, like if you were your best friend, what would you say? Or if you were someone that you want to model, what would they say?
Yeah. New Orleans flexibility drill, we call that in the Robbins environment. It's like stepping into a role model. Yeah, that works very well.
It's a perceptual position kind of question.
Yeah, I love that. Other sort of stock phrases that I have is if someone says, that would be really good if I did that, or I'd really like to do that, I will often say, use some NLP language, so embedded commands. Okay, so when would now be a good time to do it?
Yeah. And
they generally have a chuckle and go, now, and then if they know me very well, they'll grin and wave their fist at me. One of the things that I used to do a lot in Sam, in sessions was I got very good at kind of going into kind of intervention / mode, which is again, I mentioned Robin's environment a lot, but it's quite relevant. Like, so a lot of my early references to coaching was kind of, we would be working with people that are in our teams and we need to get things resolved so they could get back in the room, or they're in a good state for being in the seminar and get the most out of it. So I kind of got into a little bit of what I call fixing mode. And what I found was that with certain sessions, I was trying to kind of put a bow on every single session and get it all complete. And what I realized was that, you know what, if someone has had a massive insight or a big breakthrough, the best thing I can do normally is be quiet. And then one of my favorite questions is, so from this space, what's possible for you? Or what has become possible for you? And then again, I shut up. Because that then you kind of closing and then you're opening again. So I believe that coaching ultimately is interesting. I've got a couple of clients at the moment that maybe I didn't frame the relationship as clearly as I could have done, because they're very much seeing, they think they can. I had one come on and say, oh, I'm thinking about what I need to sort out this week. And I went, well, what if coaching wasn't about sorting stuff out? And so, yeah, sometimes they'll give you like a golden phrase to work with, but you know, hopefully that's some of those are useful questions. And it's, Chris talked about this slowing down thing. It's just giving someone space just to sometimes just sit with things. I had a lady today who was just crying from this overwhelm, and I just literally just sat there and said nothing. So actually the way to get her to go deep was for me to, and eventually after a couple of minutes she said, I'm sorry, and I said, if you weren't sorry, what would that allow you to experience? And then I shut up again. Because you know what, you got that kind of social norm of, I shouldn't be crying in front of someone that's a relative stranger. So, cool. A
question from Christian that's worth shouting out, Rich, I think. What are ways you guys describe patterns that people are running consciously and subconsciously? Some people feel or don't feel good about, or when we make them conscious about those patterns. So, yeah, one way I've found a useful way of highlighting or calling out those patterns that I think Christian's referring to is drawing out distinctions. So, for example, well, we've had one distinction already tonight: the victim owner. Another distinction is the difference between pleasing and serving. And if I was coaching Annalise, then I would have dived into something she said earlier, but I would never coach unsolicited online. So I would never talk about not challenging a client because you want to please them rather than serve them.
Sorry.
Just play it, Annalise.
No, rewind. No, you were a bit contorted in your reasoning. Can you?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nice. His language is a bit unclear, I thought, Annalise.
Yes. So let me be clear then. To be fair, so you talked about in respect to asking that question, if you did know what it would look like or something like that. And you went on to talk about I can't remember the exact words. I should have written them down, but it was towards not making the client feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, but you didn't listen properly, because I said I usually ask the question if you did know what the answer would be, and they say, well, if I knew, I would have told you, and then I basically ask again, but let's assume you do know what the answer would be, and we go into this loop. So then they start getting quite irritated, and that's not a question of pleasing versus serving. It's just a question of being kind of sensitive to, circumstances.
Okay.
And some, as with Richard, we were saying, we find some alternative, not to continue to dig into that question, but saying, okay, so if you, for example, could, consult your best friend, what would your best friend say? What would your best friend do? Or what a person or a model that you respect do
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you know, like
Yes. Okay. That's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
it.
and I think my point was you just be aware that irritation is occurring, and then you have a choice as to do you actually want to use that irritation to serve the client. And sometimes it might be appropriate to continue the irritation because actually something's going to pop through, but often it would be a different approach. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Chris. Go on. Carry on.
Yeah. So coming back to Christian's question around those patterns. Yeah, calling distinction. So, for example, my recent apprentice that I took on, the distinction that's really helped him shift was the distinction between student and practitioner. So he realized that he's very much in student mode, studying coaching, you know, reading books, watching videos and so on. And he became very good as a student. And yet he was frustrated because he hadn't taken that knowledge into practitioner modes. And of course, we've talked many times about how the coaching is an apprenticeship model. You have to work with material. You have to have clients to hone your skills. So just finding the tools to study is not enough. There are other ones. So if people want to look at distinctions, a great book recommendation is Crazy Good by Steve Chandler. I'll type it into the box. Excellent book. And there's 15 what he calls choices, but they're distinctions actually in that book, the difference between something and nothing. And the reason that's useful is because when you can talk about a distinction, just like the one I talked about with student and practitioner, then even though people can see that they might be in student mode, they can also see the flip side or the other side of the spectrum as practitioner mode. And to answer the second part of Christian's question, that allows them to feel quite empowered because they see a space they can move into.
Yeah. With regard to sort of conscious or unconscious patterns, I think it's always useful for people to be aware of what the patterns are. You know, both they might be unaware of patterns that they run that are incredibly useful for them, and actually be bringing awareness to them of what that pattern is can actually sometimes make them more consistent, or even to actually refine the pattern for even more benefit. And equally, just shining a light on a pattern and allowing the client to judge whether that is useful for them or not, and whether they do choose to change that or not. I think as a coach, it's useful to initially not to bring judgment to something, but actually they might ask for your opinion, and I'll go, well, I might tell a story about when I ran that pattern and what impact it had on me. And I said, but that's me, not you. What I do notice is, having worked with peak performance athletes, is ultimately, you know, bringing awareness or conscious awareness to patterns and actually deliberately conditioning, or in some cases unconditioning or scrambling patterns. That kind of needs to happen in what I call a practice environment. But when they go back into performance mode, and this could apply equally to someone that's a speaker or a coach or business or whatever, they need to allow whatever patterns are there to run unconditionally again. Because actually, if I go look at an extreme example of this, if you look at sports people that choke under pressure or crumble under pressure, it's actually because they're trying to consciously run patterns that actually are way stronger when they allow them to run unconsciously. So, for example, let me give you an example of a golfer. For example, a golfer that's playing brilliantly, was way ahead of the pack, 3 shots ahead in the British Open golf, few holes to go, and they're like, "Oh gosh, goodness me, I could win here, or I need to protect my lead," and then they try and over control everything with, "Are my feet right? Is my posture right? Am I gripping the club the right amount? Am I taking the backswing back a certain point?" They've immediately then shoved all those conditioned, unconscious, valuable patterns into the conscious space, and they're trying to over control. And that's actually why you see people crash and burn under pressure, because they're trying to over control things. So ultimately, you kind of need to let the unconscious patterns run, but to potentially devote some time to working on those patterns and then creating new habits and patterns along the way. So that's quite interesting, that side of it. Christian, we're going to share something about that in the near future. About Christian's doing a very interesting project where we're going to be working a lot on creating and conditioning patterns. It's a very cool thing. So whenever I get his permission, I'll share that. God, goodness, loads of comments. I was trying to work what else we've missed. Christian mentions a guy called Srini Pillay, who we had the pleasure of meeting in Amsterdam a couple of months ago, and he wrote this book, which is really cool. I've just started getting into it. Tinker, Dabble, Doodle, Try. Srini Pillay's a neuroscientist from Harvard, and he's looked at coaching techniques, NLP techniques, and how how do they impact on the neuroscience of the brain. So very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Love that. What else we missed, Chris? There's
a couple of comments on the Crazy Good book. So maybe we've got some more questions, but I'm just wondering if there are questions around. Peter Slay's dropped his phone. Questions around. I was looking right up at you then, Peter. That was bizarre.
Peter's question was, do you know any good phone holders for when I'm doing calls on this?
If there's questions of people who are online here right now around client creation or questions that are coming up with clients you already have, obviously you need to be careful about keeping the question anonymous. Anything coming up? Yeah.
And while we're waiting, I'll just read out some of the other comments. So, Sam, you recommended a book, More Time to Think by Nancy Klein. I don't know that one, actually, so that's great. I shall put that on my list. In Depth of Thinking. Love that. Thanks, mate. Appreciate that. Christian's talking about peak performance people are more open to speak about patterns that lead to results. And your belief is, women are less happy to speak about patterns when they talk about feelings. I'd say female energy is often actually more of an intuitive energy, like the male energy, and it could be male. Not male energy isn't automatically men, but male energy tends to be more focused and looking for solutions and kind of the pattern recognition piece. Female energy tends to be more flow or intuitive based. I would tend to agree with that, and I do agree with you that people in peak performance, whether it's business or sport or whatever. There are some that are just naturally just brilliant at something, and they actually tend to hit a level of performance. I'll give an example of that. Was me and my mates we all used to quite like doing archery. My mate Robin naturally very, very good at it. So we always used to win all the competitions that we used to. Now Crystal knows me better than anyone. I'm pretty competitive. So what I actually did when I went along was I listened to what the instructor said, and I took on board and looked to implement what we were being taught. Whereas my friend Robin was going on natural instinct and natural ability. And then slowly but surely he kind of does this and then starts to tail off. And I'm steadily working my way up. And I do think that peak performers are able to build on their natural ability while also being able to take on board and implement in their own flavour great patterns. So then my mate Robin didn't like it very much, and I kept on beating him then. So he still had the mindset of like, well, that's just the way it is type thing. In fact, his comment was, I wouldn't ever do anything that messed with my mind. And I went, what, all the stuff that you do every day and don't even realise it? So sometimes awareness is useful, because awareness, I think this comes from Chris's stuff, learning from mindfulness. Once you've got an awareness, then you've got a choice then. Particularly if you can create the space, you have choice. Yes, good stuff. So type away, basically. We've got plenty of time. We've got loads of other thoughts and things. Chris and I produced a list of all our patterns, but these are more sort of stuff that we've spotted in conversation. So if there are any particular things, do you want to go? Do you want to pick one of yours, Chris, or do you want to?
Yeah, well, there's a question. So I've put a couple so they're not questions submitted specifically for tonight's webinar, but they're questions that I've been asked from coaches that I've coached recently. So one is, how do I make a coaching proposal to someone for an amount of money I don't think they have? How do I make a coaching proposal to someone for an amount of money I don't think they have? So there's
you've got to cut your fees, Chris, surely. Discount heavily.
Discount heavily, cut your fees, make it work for the other person.
Yeah. Job done.
So there's quite a lot in that one. First of all, there's mind reading. We can get a sense, maybe, of where people are at financially, especially if we've offered a couple of sessions initially before we get to that proposal session. But you're still mind reading, and also it's not about it's about the want to. If the want to is strong enough, if you've created enough possibility in that conversation or conversations, then the how to, people get very creative about finding the fee. Another thing that's loaded in that question is the value. Is it the value that is it the value you think that will get the yes, or is it the value that you're placing on the worth of your coaching to that client? What's the impact of that coaching for them with their life? And in fact, this question didn't come from the guy I talked about earlier, but it's very much related to what he talked about. The guy he was coaching was a student, and therefore he wanted to make a proposal because he loved working with him in the initial phase. So he just cut his fees in half because he was a student. He wanted to make it work for him. But sometimes that doesn't serve the person as well, because there needs to be a certain level of financial engagement for that person to take action. So he made the full proposal for his full fee, and the student is now, he's spoken to his parents. His parents are funding. So his parents are actually quite happy because if they can see probably more in him than he can see in himself. They get to invest in their son in a different way. So it's a win-win-win. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, mine are very similar, Chris. Yeah, I had a conversation with a guy this week and about an apprenticeship with me, and he probably could have got the money together, but he identified that actually it wasn't the right step with him to do a full-blown. He didn't really have the time. And he genuinely didn't have the time, because we talked about the amount of work he was currently doing in his current business. He didn't have the time to go full on to a full-blown one-to-one coaching apprenticeship. But he, through discussion of different possibilities, he identified that actually potentially coming to work in the group that we'd got would make sense to them. And I think you're right. And he said, look, I don't have the money for either of the things, but you know what, the second one I think is right for me. And my dad's got some money and was been looking to invest that in me and my business, so I'll get a loan from my dad. I've mind read incorrectly in so many different ways, and also sometimes correctly. So sometimes I think someone has money and they don't. So I'm kind of ploughing ahead with the proposal, going, this is a definite yes, and suddenly you find out that it's not. I don't have the money. Sometimes you make an assumption that they don't have the money, and you might try and adjust something. And you end up doing yourself out of cash because actually they did have the money. So I think knowing your space and also having like a kind of I guess what I've got with my coaching proposals now is I've got like a buffet of options. But do you know what? There is a lower limit to it, and so if they can't find that lower limit of money, then Chris, you mentioned this I think the other week. A conversation between Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin. Where Litvin didn't have the money to work with Chandler, and he was trying to find ways in which didn't involve the cash, and basically Chandler turned around to him and said, what, for you to become the coach that you want to be, find the money, basically. I can't remember the exact quote. I'm sure Chris, you know better than I do. But
yeah, he just said, I want you to become the coach that finds the money first.
Yeah. And I love what you put there, Sam, which is rather than justify the question, question the question. Sometimes, sometimes you can allow, we call it a little bit, Rich Litvin talks about it, it's kind of this role reversal thing. It's like, do you know what, if you're starting to make assumptions about people's monetary state, you're actually almost role reversing yourself. You're actually allowing some thoughts around the client to drive you in a different direction. And I do think actually holding your space around, kind of coach, my house, my rules, and this is how you engage me, and it might not be right for you, and that's fine. Chris and I have a lot of similar principles with regards to coaching, but we've got different flavors of coaching, and sometimes you have to accept that a client may work with a different coach purely because of the flavor rather than the ability.
So we've got a few questions, Rich.
Annalisa was the top one, I think. But
so let's deal with them in order. We've got a question around confidence. Yeah, I've got a thought on that one. Probably similar to yours, I would have thought. So somebody often asks me, how can I develop more confidence? And if I'm coaching them one-to-one in my coaching room here in my home, I will reach down and say, one second. I'll reach down into my plant pot, and I'd say, drat, I'm all out of confidence. Sorry, you have to go somewhere else. Because the truth is that people look for confidence before being willing to take action. So they're looking to get into a comfortable, confident, emotional state, and then I'll take action. And it's a natural thing to do. I've done it in the past, but it's just back to front, because confidence comes from taking action. So whenever you're new to something, you just got to take the action whilst feeling unconfident. And that's where courage comes in. Courage is quite different. Courage is this giving yourself permission to act despite maybe initially not feeling very confident around something. And then the confidence comes. You got the legs of evidence build up, and that supports deep, authentic confidence moving forwards.
Yeah, I think being a practitioner in a space and getting more evidence obviously naturally builds confidence. If you're going to look at an NLP angle on this confidence thing, I would look at any emotion is formed up of VAK, or Tony Robbins has rebranded it as physiology, focus, and language, but it's the same thing. So, do you know what the emotion of confidence is? A recipe, which is a combination of what you're focusing on or what you're allowing your visual, whether it be internal in your brain or external, auditory, what you're saying out loud or what you're saying in your head, and kinesthetic, whether it be feelings or whether it's posture. And so I used to do a lot of work. In fact, actually, one of the earliest labels I gave myself in coaching was a confidence coach. It's often an indication that someone's quite early in their coaching journey, because it's often a good place to go to. But my question always be, once you create that confidence, then what's possible? But physiology is very, very important for confidence. So when I do sort of phobia cures or work with people that are nervous about speaking on stage or things like that, is how you hold your body and how you breathe is a massive part of you telling yourself what emotion you want to experience. So the confidence piece is all about, it's an opening of the body. It's a solidity, a grounding energy. It's a deep breath in the diaphragm area rather than up in the chest. So I do a lot of physiological work with confidence. So, and I actually deliberately put someone into the non-confident state. If you were non-confident or nervous, what would that look like? And it's kind of shifting around a lot. It's a lot of adrenaline going on. It's often closed and hunched. It's very shallow breathing up here, almost like to the extent of it could be like hyperventilation. So I kind of work with the contrast of the two and then go, okay, so if we're going to switch that into a confident state, what would you do? And you obviously use anchoring techniques. So confidence, I use this a lot because people naturally will do that when they've done something great. So I'll get them to stand in a solid way, center, ground, breathe deeply in their diaphragm, think of times when they were confident, or if they haven't got any access to those memories, look at people that they know are confident and model them, own that state, and then anchor it in. And then sometimes do what I call a kinesthetic swish, which I take them back into unconfident or kind of nervous, and then go, right, now snap into confidence, and again anchor it in. So that's kind of more of an NLP answer to that. But fundamentally, what Chris said is smack on, which is, the more you take action, the more you get evidence around something, it just builds confidence anyway. Just there are other techniques you can use maybe just to kind of help the process, because sometimes people have very negative references around something, or they have no positive references around something, and so sometimes those NLP techniques can help for sure. I use them a lot in phobia cures, particularly. Yeah, that kind of physiology piece. So that's a great question. Thanks for that, Annalise. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Backtail on that.
Yes, please do.
This client basically writes to me, for the remaining sessions, I would really like to focus closely on the blockage that are preventing me from being motivated and moving my marketing forward. And then she talks about not having a visualized target to work towards. It's too big and vague. And she said, I'm demotivated by my poor pay and prospect of poor pay and need to work on realizing a good salary. But these things of basically preventing her from being motivated and moving her market forward. It's a bit like, I know that I will sort of like coach her and we'll get there, but just looking at that looks pretty big, like blockage preventing her from being motivated.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, she's put a pretty big obstacle in her way. So my reaction to that, and I think Chris's will be similar because we've talked about this stuff a lot, is one of the things that I've noticed around people that get things done and are kind of successful in taking action is that they're very good at taking action regardless of how they feel. So, you know, actually action creates motivation. It's not the other way around. Motivation doesn't lead to action. Action actually creates motivation. So I would start to question it. I'd say, so at these blockages, what do they look like? So what color are they? What sort of shape are they? Could you step over them? Could you go around them? Do they actually exist? And I would say, you know, what is motivation? What is this thing? It's a bit like Chris reaching into the plant pot and looking for confidence. Motivation is its cousin that sits next to it. Yeah. And I think it's actually a little bit of a plague at the moment. This kind of, there's a lot of discussion in, I need to get motivated, or I'm going to an event to get motivated, and so on and so forth. It's actually, in my opinion, it's putting the chicken before the egg, or the egg before the chicken, whichever way around you want to look at it. But it's, you know what, motivation does not come first. It's actually you take the action, and then the motivation is the byproduct. So it's not any the blockage is you're overthinking it too much. You're not taking any action. So you're in a mental spin, and it depends what the person is. I'd either call them out directly and say something like that, or I would ease them that way. But in essence, they have created a fantastic story / trap as to why they can't get the results. And so I would be encouraging them either gently or bluntly to create a different story and actually say, well, if you did take one act, are you actually physically able to take an action today on that? Do that and then feedback to me how you feel after taking that action. And they might actually cling on to that story as well. They might actually go, try and make you wrong or justify the story even more, because sometimes there's a lot of certainty by clinging on to something that a pattern they've run for a long time, and so you almost like kind of got to peel their fingers off their attachment to this story and show them that there actually is a better story that they could tell.
Yeah, and also you can what's effective is saying, I think you're completely right. I think you're stuffed. There's actually no way you can create this. So probably done for today, I'm guessing. And then just fall into silence, and then just watch the story unravel in front of your eyes. Because then you've just taken that dream off the table for them, and then they start to defend their dream.
Yeah,
they start to think of reasons why they can do it.
Yeah, that's I like that. It's like, okay, so just let's let me give you the money back and let's call it a day.
I'll work with someone who I think has got a chance.
I know. I could try. Although she could look at me like you're absolutely nuts. but yeah, but I could do it in a way that it's quite subtle without being, you know, being sort of like between compassionate and challenging, you know, without being.
Yeah. I think challenging with love is really, really powerful
Yeah,
concept.
challenging with love. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
and finding your natural style as well. I mean, my natural style is quite in your face and quite, you know, brutal. I mean, I wouldn't may not even use the word stuffed. I might use the F word.
Yeah, I would if it wasn't
appropriate. And I use a lot of humor because that's naturally who I am. But I think finding your style as a coach. You know, I could coach like Chris coaches, but I would be a pale imitation of him as a coach, and I would hope vice versa as well. So it's like finding your space. I was going to say something else as well around that. It's going to come to me in a minute. It was genius as well. You talk, Chris, and I'll think of something.
Going to be a genius comment. I'll just add a final thing here before we move on to a question from Siwash, and that is now there's this guy.
Here he comes. Here he comes.
The people who are currently in the Secret Business of Coaching group will know this guy. This guy is Bob, and
1:43 a.m.
Bob can't tell the time either. So the reason I keep Bob on my desk is because Bob's a robot, and robots just have data in, they process, and there's data out. There's action out. So it's a reminder. It's a reminder to me that a lot of the time, not all of the time, a lot of the time, it's just a case of just taking action, just taking action, just taking action, just taking action.
And that's a great point.
Yeah. So, you know, Bob doesn't really have emotions. And you know, sometimes when the internal voice is speaking from a place of love, then, you know, rock on with the emotions and turn them up. But often the internal voice is speaking from a place of fear, and that's when Bob comes in useful.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like I was actually chatting to a client before we came on this call about, you know, actually having allocated thinking time. And I said, you know, he said, I don't have time to think about what I'm doing in my business. And I went, that's probably because you're thinking all the time. What if you just had allocated thinking time? I got this concept from my mentor, Keith Cunningham. I think it was Michael Milken he first got the concept from. Allocated thinking time. And the client got it straight away. And he went, oh, so does that mean the rest of the time is acting time? And I went, that's exactly what it is. Taking action. And then you have very, very defined but limited thinking time. I remembered what my genius comment was, Chris. So thanks for bringing Bob on board. I don't know if it's genius. It is for me anyway. So if someone presents something to me like that with, you know what, I've got blockages that are stopping me from my motivation and blah, 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 I'll go, that's fantastic. So you've got a great recipe there for getting stuck. Could you explain to me exactly how you do it? So I'll get them to unpack the whole recipe, and I go, so yeah, how big are these blocks? How big do they need to be? What shape? And I'll get them to talk through it. And so I say, is that the recipe? If I copied that, would I be stuck like you are? And they go, yeah. And I go, so if I didn't do one of those things, well, that means it wouldn't work. And so it's just bringing awareness that they are running that pattern. Yeah. Chris, we got a nice one there from Siwash, haven't we?
Yeah. No,
yeah, good. Thanks, Annalise. Great question. Really good question. Yeah, thank you.
So we've got a question. Got a question from Siwash, who says, what do you advise to coaches that are starting out? And I think the second question he asks is linked to that. Fill up your practice with low fee, then raise your fee ? And then we've got Sam has mentioned, so you've got an experience, Sam, that you think might be useful to share. Is it related to Siwash's question? Right, okay. So let's first of all have Siwash unmuted, if you want to, Siwash. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you.
So the question, I've sort of summarized the question there. What's the full question?
Well, the question for me is really, do you start at something that you think you're worth at, or do you start as something that's actually makes it easier to get clients on board, build a practice, and then basically start raising your fees?
Okay, so I got some thoughts on this one. Rich, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So the first question was, what do you advise to coaches that are starting out? Don't do it. It's the hardest business in the world to create. And you know what? Actually, what I would actually genuinely say would be very aware about what you're getting yourself into here, because it's the hardest business that I have ever created, but actually it's the most rewarding. So my advice is, knowing what I've known and what I've done, is I think it was in The Prosperous Coach, or I read it somewhere else, the kind of discussion between Litvin and Chandler about, do you go low fee and then evolve your fee up, or do you go in at something you're worth and kind of hold your ground? I think Rich was more the hold your ground space. And my advice now, so having one of the dangers I had was I came into the coaching business having reference of earning very good money in other fields. And that can be a challenge, because you're like, well, I want to earn at least that level of money in coaching. Otherwise, is it worth it? Even though it might be more time flexible, is it worth it? So I did the hold my price thing. And I did a lot of thumb twiddling for quite a few months, thinking, and then you start to question yourself, going, so is it because I'm not a good enough coach? Am I not getting the right clients in front of me? And kind of you start to self-question yourself to a large degree. So my advice would be, now having seen my own experience and then what eventually got me going, and also we've got, I know, Sam, you're going to share your experience. We've got Peter on here who's I think taken an extremely wise approach to starting his coaching practice. I would initially advise any coach starting out to coach pretty much anyone and everyone initially, and get an experience of what it's like to coach a wide variety of people. So you get an experience of, who do I love coaching? What do I love coaching them on? Where am I getting results? Where am I not getting results? Getting a kind of a gut feeling for people that I have the ability to pay or not, although we don't want to do the mind reading bit. Who do I love working with? And then you actually will start to then form patterns of, okay, sometimes it's quite difficult to start the coaching business to go, I want to work with this type of client. But if you've coached a lot of people, or as many as your time allows, you can start to get, I loved working with this client and that client, and there's a pattern there between the two, so I'll do more of that. And I hated coaching this particular client, so you know what, that I'm going to create a set of rules where that would eliminate that sort of person. And as you go more and more through the process, and I do think it's important to, I think our own experience of coaching the group as well, it's just getting going. It's just getting paid for coaching, and then evolving up with my. What's my definition of results? Debs has asked me. So results for me, Deb, is someone's had a shift, or sometimes it might even be a transformation, where it's like, do you know what? If you ask them the question, was that time well spent? In essence, get results. You know, and they might not even be the thing that they came for. But I often ask that question, was that time well spent? And what I found, just in case anyone else is interested in it, I think it shows up in a lot of coaches, is I'm very good at coaching people that are quite a lot like me. It's kind of a bit of self-coaching as well, but I'm also more in the mentoring / coach space. So I tend to go, well, I'll tell stories about myself, and I go, that story might have a relevance to you or not. So my my advice would be what you put in COAsh, which is, I don't say low fees, but do you know what? Chris and I talk about this happy price a lot. It's like, you know, it's a fee that will get the client to have some skin in the game, so they're committed. So this is the problem with extended free coaching, is you're actually doing your client a disservice, because do you know what? There are some people that highly value free, but do you know what? They are rare beasts, and I'm not one of them. I don't value free. You know what? You all clearly do to some degree, because you showed up on this webinar. But do you know what? We've got 59, 60 people registered just from me and Chris putting a few posts out there, and look how many showed up. That's how much people value free. I'll be interested to see how many people show up next week when we're talking about money. I bet it'd be more.
Well, I don't see this as free, to be honest.
Yeah,
we invest our time, so.
Smack on right, mate. Smack on right. So you get that, right? Most people don't. Most people don't. You're absolutely 100% correct on that. So I think there's a happy price, which is the client's got skin in the game, they're committed, and you're doing it thinking, yeah, you know what, this is worthwhile. I mean, I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoying learning. Maybe creating some case studies / testimonials. I prefer the word case studies. And you're experiencing what it's like to be paid for providing tremendous value. And then you can evolve up seriously quickly. And we'll put Chris and I will probably talk more next week about the evolution of fees and so on and so forth. But I think that's the easiest way to start. It's a bit like, if I draw a little, I know, Chris, I'll give you some time to talk in a minute, mate. Don't worry. I think it's a little bit like, you know what, I won't draw a diagram after all because I'm not good at art as Chris is. I think it makes sense to keep yourself in stretch zone, not shock zone. So that means if you're going to taper in your coaching, build it up so you can see tangible progress of it increasing and you building something up, rather than I'm just going to wait, and suddenly I might get this, boom, I'm suddenly getting paid loads of money for coaching. Because the longer it goes where you're not getting paid, the more you start to doubt yourself and look within. I see a lot of coaches looking within and they think the problem is them, and it probably isn't. It's just they're just not engaging in the practice of coaching. And I know that because that's exactly how I started my coaching business. And probably I'd quite like to have that 4 or 5 months back where I didn't create a client. And I was embarrassed because I was actually getting mentoring from someone else as well on how to do it. And I was waiting for these big fees. And it wasn't happening. And that's not fun. It's not fun having that all or nothing thing. So some of you might be very good at dealing with that, kind of jumping off the cliff edge and working how to fly. I think it makes sense to kind of build it up. Go on then, Chris. You have a say. You got 11 minutes.
Yeah, I know Sam wants to add his bit as well. So
okay, you got 1 minute. So we'll get to give 10 to Sam.
10 to Sam. He's a guest. You see the mutual respect we have here in between core leaders of this group. So happy price, yes, definitely. That's a great one. And you literally play that game by starting at start at £5. Is that happy? No. 10? No. 20? No. So just keep on doubling it or adding significant amounts till you get to a fee where you think, yeah, to provide this level of service for this person, or this contract for this person over 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is, this feels like a happy price for me. I'm not completely, I'm not undervaluing the value that I have to offer here for this person. Joe made a good point as well. You can also say, look, especially if you're new to coaching in the early phases, it's very good to have case studies. So you can say to somebody, my fee for this 3-month program or 6-month program is X amount. However, for yourself, because I have what was called a case study approach at the moment, whereby I'm asking for people to record the progress of their coaching a bit more detailed than you would normally, maybe some videos as well. Then because there's an extra value in that for me, I'm happy to offer you a proposal for this amount. So it's a case study approach. And that's a nice way to, first of all, go in with the full fee, the true fee. So you've got the contrast principle between that then and the fee that you offer them for the case study. And you give them a choice. They can pay the full fee if they want to and not have to do the case study with you. So you're giving them a choice. But yeah, reiterating what Rich said, I see coaching business as an old kind of Victorian machine that's been in the dark basement for a while, and it's all seized up, and you've got all these cogs. And you kind of just got to put a bit of oil on one of the cogs and just started to creak, started to turn. And that might be your first client session. If you do a one-off session for, think I started about 15 quid last week.
Now he's up to 16 already.
16 quid this week. and you just gotta start that wheels turning, and then a bit more oil. And what Richard's said is spot on. It's not where you start, it's how fast you can move. And I've seen that myself, I've seen that in Rich, seen that other coaches as well. That's the key. So just getting the momentum, getting the snowball starting to roll. And just as a snowball gathers mass at an exponential rate as it rolls down a hill, so does a coaching business as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Manoj says, what is a good low price to start with? So I don't know, Manoj, for you. But, you know, I would typically, it's not uncommon for me to hear coaches starting out 40 quid an hour, 50 quid an hour, 60 quid an hour, that sort of level. It's cheap as chips, trust me. You know, you would look back on that time period. I think I was a bit more expensive than Chris. I think I did start out at 30 quid an hour. And I remember thinking, God, I wonder if I could get up to 40 or 50. And I remember very clearly when I first started charging £100 an hour, I'm like, holy shit, someone's paying me £100 an hour for coaching, and it keeps on going up. And the most important thing to remember is it's just a number. It's just a number that you pick. There is no experience or results or what have you. You know, the better you are as a coach, the more people are going to want to work with you, and they want to keep on work with you, and they'll tell their mates about you, and so your demand goes up, and naturally your fee will go up. But do you know what? Right now, out there are tons of coaches charging more money than me, and probably are not as good coach as me. It's a subjective comparison anyway. And equally, there are probably many coaches out there that are better than me and charging less than me. It's just a number. It's a number.
Yeah,
it's a number that I picked.
I agree, Rich. But don't you think that in the end, you know, people that are better than you or worse, let's say worse than you, because you're really good, eventually sort of like the market will level them, because, you know, it's a bit like, you know, it's a market, right? So if a product, let's say, you know, like, I don't know, a type of washing machine, it's more expensive than another type of washing machine, and the second type works much better, it's better value for money, in the end, the first one will actually naturally come to cost less.
Yeah. I like your logic on that, and I think in a transparent market that is true. And I think I would say that, in my opinion, the coaching market is slightly transparent. So I think generally you're true. Look, for example, if you take a coach who charges ridiculously high fees and they're rubbish, you know, their clients probably wouldn't renew because they wouldn't get the value from it. I know some coaches that are paid a lot of money, and I don't really rate them as coaches, or I think their coaching is pretty vanilla. But you know what? If you are a pretty average coach, but you are coaching very high net worth individuals, even your bang average coaching can be worth a lot of money to them. But yes, I think generally you've got a point. I also think that, do you know what? If you are a very good coach and your fees are too low, you will get the results that you're putting out there, because, do you know what? Your clients will not have enough skin in the game, and they will not be bringing all of themselves to the session. So you're almost kind of shooting yourself in the foot, really, because you will attract lower, for want of a better phrase, lower quality clients who are not as engaged, and you're going to think, God, maybe I'm not as good as a coach as I am, and actually your problem is your fees aren't high enough.
Yeah.
There we go. Right. Yeah, it's not a commodity. You're absolutely right, Sam. 100%. Couldn't agree with that more. It is not a commodity. So when someone asks my fees and I haven't given them a coaching experience, same old metaphor. I've used this time and time again. If you ask me my fees without understanding how I could work with you as a coach, and I don't know until I work with you, that's why we need that initial session, or maybe sessions. It's like you standing outside a car garage with me, looking through tinted windows. You can't see the cars inside. There's no branding, and you're saying, how much is the car? And you don't know what's behind it. It could be a bike. It could be a Fiat. It could be a Ferrari. They don't know. And so they have to come inside the garage and they go, I see that you're kind of up the Lamborghini Ferrari end of things, Rich. And I go, yeah, I am. But I said, you still don't know it's the right car, because you're going to need to go in that. You might prefer driving a Lamborghini to a Ferrari or to a Porsche. And so it is absolutely, Sam, I couldn't agree with you more on that, mate. It's like, it is not a commodity. So if someone says, "Oh, you're expensive," compared to other coaches, I'm like, "Well, I'm not that coach. I don't know if I'm expensive because we haven't found out yet whether I'm valuable, whether our interaction will be valuable for you or not." And you know, Chris, we could coach the same client, and that client, you know, might think that Chris is God's gift on earth and that I'm rubbish. And you know, that could be true, or yeah, it could be true, or it could not be true. And I'll say, if you think Chris is good, you want to be coached by his robot Bob. He's excellent.
So before, I know I did promise Sam to come on. So just a further clarification on that. The value of your coaching is really equal to, so the value of your coaching for somebody is equal to the depth of your coaching, or the impact of your coaching, multiplied by the potential in that client. So there's a multiplication of those two factors. So it's basically your ability through coaching to activate the client, and it's the ability of the client to be activated. That's why when you're working with a person who's already achieved success in one area of their life, they're an action taker, and you've got great coaching abilities, that's where the marriage of those two, the multiplication of those two, then means that service of coaching that you're offering this person is very valuable. That's my view anyway. So Sam, let's you had a view on this, or you had experience on this coaching fee. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, all good, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry guys, I know it's the second time I've spoken. I don't want to make it the Sam show or anything, but it was just what somebody was saying about pricing and kind of how to price and how to attract clients. It really resonated with me. And Chris, you all know sort of about this because we were messaging back and forth. And speaking of commodities, I'll wrap that into the story as well because it's quite a big part of it. So about 6 months ago, I started my coaching practice. And obviously you guys probably way more experience than me, but obviously there's one or two that from the comments will really benefit from this story. So about 6 months ago, I started my coaching practice, and for about 4 or 5 years, I've created quite a successful, or a very successful personal training business. And I've been kind of coaching alongside that. And when somebody's buying on price, because I'd have tons of people contacting me saying, "Sam, how much are you?" And that's the first question they ask. And that's always red lights for me. And generally speaking, it's just call me, otherwise don't bother. And to create an experience for somebody, then they have value to add, or value on that, and it's a totally different story. So anyway, I started my coaching practice about 6 months ago, and I read The Prosperous Coach, and I went out there, and I literally didn't have any expectations. I went out, I'd say, "Can I help you with that?" I'd invite them into a session, I'd learn, and I'd give them a deep session. And actually, to my surprise, I kind of made 3 or 4 grand in my first couple of months, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing."
Brilliant.
And so then I thought, right, you know what? You know, I've got a 9-month-old baby. My wife's not on maternity leave. She's off work. I can make this big and I can go for it. So I decided, in my ultimate wisdom, to take on a business coach. And it was really interesting experience. And it's led me to actually stop working with her and going back to how I started my coaching practice. Because it became about niches. It became about selling. It became about scripts. It became about my bank account. And I became completely just detached from my coaching practice entirely, from myself, from service, from delivering something really impactful and something really quite beautiful to somebody. It stopped me doing that because all I was thinking about was, can I get this sale? No, let's move on to the next one. I chopped my prices down to make it more affordable for people, and I attracted the wrong people. And the lesson for me was just, it takes time, man. It's not something you can rush. And so now I'm going back to personal training, and I'm building my coaching practice at the same time, and it's allowing me to relax. And interestingly, I'm having more inquiries and more people saying yes to me than I did previously. So to answer about the kind of how much to charge and attracting clients, I think it's just to take time and stick with who you are as a coach. You know, I learned a hard lesson, man, and I've had to borrow money from parents to pay bills because I fucked it up, and I wanted to share that because if it stops somebody else from doing the same, you know, and yeah, so me and my clients are far happier now.
What a brilliant story! Thanks, Sam. I couldn't agree with you more. It's just like, that I'd like to capture that bit of video and play it to every coach out there, because I was very lucky that my mentor put me onto Prosperous Coach and this concept that you can create coaching practice through coaching and service, and that you don't have to do this salesy bullshit approach. And it's so many people will try and steer you down that kind of commoditized push selling approach. And I got to a point in my coaching practice, and I was fortunate in a financial position whereby I had a lot of assets, but I was starting to run out of cash. So I could have liquidated assets, but having a position where you aren't needy, the old needy is creepy concept, is really, really important. And what I was looking for an external validation, a bit like what happened to you. And then suddenly it clicked that actually what I needed to do was to go deeper into who I was as a person and to come from that space. And that's clearly where you started out from and where you come back to. And I guarantee you we'll have this conversation in a year's time. You will have an extremely successful coaching practice just by applying those principles that you've just described. That, to me, you just captured the essence of how to and how not to building coaching business. Obviously we'll talk about it more next week, but that's an awesome share. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, so don't employ a coach. Yeah, that's a brilliant story, Sam. Yeah, top notch. And nice to see as well that you've, and I did that. I had to go back to, so I had to go back to my old job, in a way, my old career of engineering, to get that stability back into my life. So I was then able to coach from a place of non-neediness financially. And then from that space, that's how I've been able to create a 6-figure coaching practice. And that wouldn't have happened unless I'd eaten a bit of humble pie and gone back to that part-time work. So yeah, really pleased to see you've kind of taken it on the chin and cleaned up. There's a nice phrase in coaching called just cleaning up. So good on you, mate. Yeah.
Alrighty, I know we've hit an hour and a half, so let's respect the space. Deb typed in about authenticity. I totally agree with that. That came through loud and clear from what Sam said. And yeah, you don't need to sell. We'll talk about that next week. Chris and I obviously next Tuesday, isn't it? We're doing the final one on a Tuesday. Is it all right, Chris?
Next Tuesday, yeah.
All right, hold on. Let me just check my diary. Yeah, I'm right.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, next 8:30. Yeah, we're gonna. I mean, it's titled "How to Create a £100,000 plus a year coaching business" because it's kind of what we learned. We're not promising that in an hour and a half we'll be able to teach you everything, but we will literally, everything's on the table for that. I'm happy to talk through as much as what I do and what I've learned and what I've learned not to do as well. But the essence of what Sam's described there is a big part of the journey. So yeah, thanks for your time. If you've got any queries or questions, or want to talk to us about TSBOC or the stuff that we do, I'll put it in there as well. It's about as hard salesy as we get because we got to eat our own cooking, right? secretbusinessofcoaching@gmail.com, or just contact me or Chris on Facebook if you've got any questions around what we've talked about tonight or building a coaching business in general. For me, it is important that what Chris and I have basically done is taken the essence of the Prosperous Coach and other sources in that kind of genre and field, and then worked out how does it practically work for us. And built our coaching businesses that way. So for me, it was just really adding detail onto the principles of the Prosperous Coach, which is basically, in essence, building a coaching business through coaching, through service. And it does work. It does work. You don't need anything else. You just need to know how to apply it.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot in the how-to. So yeah, it does work, and it also feels great to do it that way as well. Yeah. In my case, I mean, to be straight, I mean, it's taken me 4 years to get where I am now. It's taken me 4 years of full-time coaching practice to get the sort of numbers that I'm at now, and I don't mind sharing numbers with people next week.
Chris was lucky because I was exploring that full-time route before he did, and I just passed it on to him, and then the little beggar went off and found some other ways of doing it and made loads of money, and then very kindly shared it back. So having someone else like a sparring partner or someone just to bounce stuff off and talk about the highs and the lows has been invaluable for both of us. And I'm hoping that through these webinars that you're all getting some of the insights into the value of that. So yeah, we'll bring it all to the table next Tuesday. All right. Cheers, Chris. You show a lot of promise, mate.
Yeah, you're not bad yourself, mate.
Thanks for all the great questions, everyone. Thanks for the participation, the interaction. We'll send out email. We'll send out the replay in the next couple of days, and send out an email about the final bits, which is kind of the meaty end of things. And look forward to seeing many of you next Tuesday.
Yep. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Bye all. Yeah, have an outstanding week. Bye now.
Bye-bye.